Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. For those of you who may be new to me, my name is Kristen Moulton and welcome to my epilepsy kickoff video. I am so excited to see all of you here. Thank you so much for coming and showing your support for epilepsy. Just gonna turn off my phone because that's fun. Okay, so let's go through the chat. We have Makeup Mom and Son. We have, oh my gosh, there's so many people. Okay. Makeup Mom and Son. She stole my thunder. Thank you so much for coming. Epilepsy Niagara. That is the office that I work for. It's the organization in Niagara Falls. It is a non-profit organization. Okay, Chris's Clever Craft. Thank you for coming. Michael's Adventures. Allie Crafts Pursuits. We have Scratch and Pete, my good friend. Thank you so much for being here. We have Palettes, Pouts, Perfumes, and Panning. We have my daughter in here, I believe, as well. Philip Lemon, thank you so much for coming. Tuber Chat, my love, obviously, thank you so much for coming. Rock Chick Beauty, thank you so much for coming as well. The How To Lady, thank you so much for coming, beautiful friend. Oh gosh, I'm just trying to go through the chat. Hilda DC, thank you so much for coming. If I miss anyone, I am so sorry. I'm trying not to miss anyone. Nita VR Designs, thank you so much. Mr. Bubbles, thank you so much. Hi, Jaden, thanks for coming. K-Elastic TV, thank you so much. Come Hither with Heather, thank you so much for coming. Okay, I think I'm all caught up with welcoming everybody into the chat. So epilepsy really is something that is near and dear to my heart. It's not only an organization that I work for, it actually impacts my life in several different ways. For those of you who don't know, my daughter's father, his name is Jesse, he had epilepsy. Technically, he still has it, but he is now seizure free and has been seizure free for quite a number of years now. And so when we were first married, his epilepsy was pretty well controlled. I think he only had one seizure in front of me, I think, and it was a very small one. And it was a matter of him having an aura, which he was able to take his medication and it stopped the seizure. But when Kira was born, yeah, she had these small paper cut like cuts on her brain. And she spent the first 2 months of her life in a hospital. And it was, a scary time and everything. But they did warn us because of these cuts, there is a possibility of her having a seizure at some point in her life. She might or she might not. But we did experience a seizure with her in 2013. It was very scary. I was already working at Epilepsy Niagara at this time. I started in 2008 and I started as the education coordinator. And then a year later, I was named the executive director. So I'm the person that maintains the organization. I do all of the client services as well as fundraising with my board and work with the volunteers within the organization. So in 2013, she had a seizure, and thankfully, because I work at Epilepsy Niagara, I knew what to do and basically prevented her from dying. So she does not have epilepsy. It was one seizure. So far, knock on wood, things are good with her. But yeah, so there is a chance that she could have a seizure at another time. So this is very, very important to me. Also, I had a nephew that had epilepsy, and unfortunately, he passed away in 2018 because he had a seizure. And when he had a seizure, his head went into the waste paper basket in the bathroom, and he asphyxiated and unfortunately passed. It was an extremely difficult part, a point in time with my family, and it was extremely horrifying and sad and a struggle for my sister and everything. So it was it was a time, but thankfully, with the knowledge that I have of epilepsy and working with Epilepsy Niagara, I feel that I've really come to be quite knowledgeable and passionate about this specific disease. I'm just going to go through the chat really quick to see if there's any questions. Um, if anybody has any questions about epilepsy, things that you want to know that you're curious about, please don't feel free to put them in the chat. Oh, thank you, Heather, for sharing. I really appreciate it. So, Allie, your cousin has epilepsy. Yes. So sometimes a person, like a child, can grow out of epilepsy, and it depends on the seizures and where in the brain that is happening and the actual type of seizures. But it is common for when children have epilepsy that it continues into adulthood. Oh gosh. So she can't walk or talk. I am so sorry to hear that. I can imagine that it's been so hard for your family. One thing I do want to ask you, Allie, is whether or not there's an epilepsy organization in the area that your family lives in that you can reach out to for support and help if you need it. Oh, Thrill Seeks, thank you so much for that super chat. That is so generous of you. Thank you so much. Hey, Tiffany Wears T-shirts. Thank you for coming. Hey, Kid Wonders. So, Jaden, Purple Day is March 26th every year. It doesn't change. It's the same day. And it's actually an international day of awareness for epilepsy. It is celebrated around the world, which is really, really exciting. And it was actually developed by an 8-year-old named Cassidy Megan in 2008, I believe. So she is well into her teens now, or I guess she's over 20 now. Oh my gosh. She's such a bright light in the epilepsy community. I'm so proud of her. Hi, Winston. Thank you for coming. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few questions that were sent to me through Instagram as well as emailed to me and messaged on, Instagram. I had to think for a second. So, what exactly is epilepsy and is it contagious? So, epilepsy is a neurological condition that happens when a person's had 2 or more seizures. When a person has only one seizure, that does not mean necessarily that they have epilepsy. It just means they had a seizure. So, Kira actually falls into a statistic of 1 in 10 Canadians will have one seizure in their lifetime. And that actually seems like a pretty high statistic. And that's because a person can have a seizure in sports, whether or not they obtained a head injury. It's really high fevers. There's so many different circumstances of which a person can have just one seizure. For instance, a car accident, if someone has a concussion, the swelling in the brain could cause a person to have a seizure, but that doesn't mean that they have epilepsy. Epilepsy is a chronic disease. Is it contagious? No, it is not contagious. You cannot catch epilepsy. You can't develop epilepsy if someone besides you sneezes. You're not going to catch epilepsy. If they touch you, you're not going to catch epilepsy. It's not something that is transferable at all. Chris Larson's Adventures, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for the super chat. That's so generous of you, and I really, really, really appreciate you. Okay, so how do seizures happen? Okay, so when and so I'm going to do a small analogy. It's a really, really basic one. I'm not going to get too in depth or anything like that. But think of a relay race, and you have a runner has the baton, and they're running and running and running. And so the baton is the neuron that passes through the passages in your brain. The neuron carries information. The neuron is basically responsible for telling your body how to breathe, blink, all the things that you don't even think of, as well as moving your hands like I'm doing now. I want my hands to move. So therefore, there's neurons passing in my body. So there's this relay race, there's the baton, and the baton is passed to the next runner. The runner takes it, keeps going, going, going. And the neurons pass and do these like interchanges. So when that person in the marathon trips and falls and that baton goes flying, that's like a stop in the brain. And that's how a seizure can happen. It's when something inhibits the path of that neuron, could cause a seizure, and therefore seizure happens. There's a bit of a stall in the brain, but that baton gets picked up, and then the person keeps running and passing the baton and onward and onward. So that's basically, in a nutshell, how to explain a seizure, what happens in the brain. Makeup Mom and Son, thank you so much for that super chat. That is so unbelievably generous, and I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Okay, so just checking to see if there's any more questions. Okay, Allie, great. Oh, that's upsetting that there's not an organization near you. Um, Maybe what if you want to reach out to me on Instagram, maybe I can find out if there is a national organization, or sorry, a state organization that your family can reach out to. Sometimes it just helps with having a support person that you can talk to that can help arrange respite and other types of support programs, as well as peer connections and things for the family as well. Oh, Chris Larson, your father had epilepsy. Um, oh, yes. So I knew that Kevin had a seizure as a baby. And so that could have happened because there what could possibly have been a fever at that time. Stock Explorer, thank you so much for coming. Um, right. So the how-to lady, yeah. So that's another cause that can, another reason that can cause epilepsy is an infection in the brain, and meningitis is actually one of the most common types of infections that can cause epilepsy. And for those of you who don't know, grand mal seizures or tonic-clonic, they're very traumatic looking seizures. They're very scary. Even when I see one today, I hitch a breath for a second before I jump into action to help. And it's really heartbreaking to see anyone have this kind of seizure, but also it's really hard when a child has a seizure, because all you want to do is pick them up and hold them. And that's actually the wrong thing to do, but that can make the seizure even worse. The how-to lady, I'm really sorry to hear that. If there's anything that I can do for anybody, if you have any questions that you're afraid to ask in the chat, you can also reach out to me on Instagram and I can help in any way that I can. So is epilepsy hereditary? So this is actually an ongoing research type of thing that's happening. It can be certain syndromes and disorders of epilepsy can be hereditary, but for the most part, it is not. So my daughter's father has epilepsy, but that was an acquired brain injury. It wasn't anything to do with his genes. Kira had a seizure, but that happened to be because of an illness and an infection in her brain. So that is not a hereditary thing, but in some cases, yes, it can be, but the chances of that is quite low. Ali's Crafts, your brother had a seizure when he was little. Right. So you can have one seizure, and sometimes you can have more than one seizure if it's a part of, if you were in an accident and your brain is swollen, that can cause a seizure. You can have a couple seizures because of that. And until the brain goes back to its regular size, the seizures may stop. Therefore, that is not a seizure disorder or epilepsy of any kind. It's provoked because of an outside happenstance with that. Oh, a Sage Lifestyle, you're so thank you. I appreciate you for being here. Hi, Mrs. VNC09. Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Night Star Beauty. Thank you so much for coming, especially when it's early in the morning there, probably, right? Okay, so thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Real Six. I'll talk to you later. So, Allie, does it just happen? Yes. So, epilepsy can happen at any stage in anybody's life. It is, it's so unknown. So, when a person is diagnosed with epilepsy, sometimes, pretty much most of the time, I think it's 60% of the time, doctors don't know why it happens and what the cause of it. And in that case, it's either called cryptogenic or idiopathic epilepsy. And a person can have a seizure at any time. In fact, tomorrow I could have a seizure and it not be provoked in any way, type or fashion. And it might not be epilepsy, but if a person can develop epilepsy at any age. However, it's most prominent when with young children and seniors because either the brain isn't fully developed and it's growing and changing and morphing, or in seniors, as we get older, brain cells start to die. Therefore, epilepsy could happen at any time during the senior years, especially those with any type of Alzheimer's or dementia. And yes, you can have febrile seizures. So febrile seizures are when someone has a really high fever, and I don't mean 101 or 102. Usually it's over 103. The brain just can't handle that kind of temperature and can sometimes go a little haywire. With febrile seizures, it usually happens with young children and they grow out of it most of the time. I do have one client who is in their 20s that still experiences some form of febrile seizures, but they're getting less and less as the time goes on. Complex seizures. So, yes. So, this is interesting because there's two different types or categories of seizures. There's generalized and there's partial. Generalized is where it starts in one part of the brain and crosses both lobes and encompasses the entire brain. Sometimes it just starts automatically and affects both lobes of the brain at the same time. And partial seizures are seizures that start in one part of the brain and do not spread. Complex partials are actually the most common type of seizure. When people say the word seizure, you often are thinking of the most dramatic kind of seizure where a person gets very stiff, falls to the floor and starts to shake. And that's actually not the most common seizure. The most common kind of seizure is complex partial. And this happens in so many different kinds of ways where it might look as though they're not paying attention to you when it starts. Their eyes may glaze over, and a multitude of things could happen. I have a client that when this happens, she rubs her arm 3 times like this, a few seconds, and then does it again, and then comes out of it. And it's like, okay, I had a seizure. What did I miss? And she's so cute and funny about it. But there are other people that have this type of seizure, and end up wandering. They might sound nonsensical. They might be talking, but it's the same phrase or the same word over and over and over again. And it's weird to see. And it's one of the seizures that is often mistaken for a person being drunk or under the influence of drugs. I have a client that when he goes into this kind of seizure, he, yeah, he has this undeniably strong sense of paranoia and he hides, but he also takes his clothes off. And unfortunately, this type of seizure can happen at any time of day. And one time this happened while he was in public, and unfortunately, this happened, and people around him thought he was a danger and called the police. And when the police came, they tried, they thought that he was high and because he was wandering. And then when they tried to catch him, he resisted arrest and they threw him to the ground and he got hurt very, very, very badly and actually made the seizure worse and then went into a tonic-clonic or grand mal seizure. And we can't necessarily fault the police because they didn't know. They have to act on how they know, and that they ended up inviting me to the headquarters to discuss epilepsy and teach seizure first aid and teach them seizure recognition of knowing the difference between when a person is high or when a person is having this kind of a seizure. But it's not always, as dramatic as that. It can be quite mild, and sometimes a person can become violent during a seizure. Allie, I would love to hear this story about the complex partial seizures and what happens to your loved one when they have it. Yes, so diabetes. A person, when their sugar goes too high or too low, that could possibly cause a person to have a seizure. I'm just not sure how high or how low that has to go for a person to go into a seizure. Also, with anyone in the water, if you see someone having a seizure in the water, you have to call 911 right away, because if a person inhales water, that's extremely dangerous. That can cause a multitude of horrible things. So please call 911 for that. If anybody wants to learn Seizure First Aid, I would love to teach it. Oh, sorry, Sage Lifestyle that has the loved one with complex partial. Thank you so much. If you want to reach out to me, please do. Other than medication, what other treatments are there for epilepsy? So medication is the number one thing that's going to help with epilepsy, but there are other things that can help manage it. So that could be CBD, it could be medicinal marijuana, yoga, lifestyle changes, change in medication, making sure that you get appropriate sleep and rest, and knowing your limitations as well is really important. If you know that you are so tired and you had a horrible sleep and that affects your epilepsy, but you're still driving, please don't drive that day. There are many people out there that have epilepsy but have their seizures really well managed with medication that have their driver's licenses, but a seizure can happen at any time regardless of that. So it's really important to know your limits. Can it be treated? Yes. So it can be treated with, diet, lifestyle. Medication is number one, but also there's surgery that can be done as well, depending on what part of the brain that the seizures are happening or stemming from. That part of the brain could be removed, or a part of it, of where the actual kind of like epicenter of where the seizures are happening, part of it can remove. That helps to reduce the amount of seizures. Also, there is a device called a VNS, or a vagus nerve stimulator. And it's a little thing, it's about that big, and it just sits underneath the skin. It almost looks like a pacemaker, and think of it as a pacemaker for your vagus nerve or your brain. And the VNS is hooked up to, there's two veins that are right here, and that is the vagus nerve, or not vein, they're nerves. And it hooks up to it, and therefore it sends out an electronic pulse every few seconds or minutes, however, it depends on the type of seizure that you're having, or the type of seizure disorder that you have. And it just sends out these pulses that help control it. Now, if you start to feel a seizure coming on, like with an aura or anything like that, there's a magnet also that you can take and swipe it across it, and that stops it, stop the seizure from happening. Oh, heal the DC, yeah. So those are called nocturnal seizures. And one of the interesting things about nocturnal seizures is that it's actually the one of the seizure types that you can still have your license, because you only have these seizures at night and when you're sleeping, not just at night, but while you're sleeping. So as long as you're not sleeping and driving, you're pretty good. So therefore, they usually allow people to retain their licenses when you have that kind of seizure disorder. So the Stocks Explorer, I am the executive director of Epilepsy Niagara. So I do the educational components, I do client services, I do the fundraising, and I'm the only employee of the agency right now. So I do basically the Jill of all trades of the agency. Make a mom and son, how many types of seizures are there? So this is a really interesting question, and it's one that I actually really love answering because it usually astounds people. So there's approximately 40 different types of seizures, but there's between 300 and 400 types, syndromes, and disorders combined, which is a lot, and I won't mention every single one of them here. Yes, Michael's Adventures. That is absolutely correct. So there is a diet called the Ketogenic Diet. And this used to be really popular for kids living with epilepsy because it's an extremely high diet in fat. It is very, very, very meticulous. It is extremely difficult to stick with and continue with. Not everybody can do it, which is why it's most popular for kids, because it's easier for kids to kind of change their direction with their diet. They can do this for adults, and that's a modified Atkins diet that does help. And for most parts, a lot of people want to get off medication and only have CBD or the ketogenic diet or anything like that. And unfortunately, it's not always possible to do that. The medication really is key to, helping to manage those seizures. And it's really important to have seizures really well controlled, because when they are uncontrolled, the person can be at risk of SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. Now, this is very rare that happens when a person dies because of SUDEP, but a person is most at risk when their seizures are really uncontrolled. And by those seizures, I really mean the tonic-clonic or the grand mal type seizures. The how-to lady. Do you know how many kinds of medications that your sister tried? There's so many different kinds of medications out there, and it can be a very frustrating process. But when a person has had unsuccess with 2 or more medications, it's a good idea to talk to the doctor about either a VNS or surgery to help with that. Yes, a healthy lifestyle definitely helps for people with all types of conditions, especially epilepsy. Yes, the How To Lady, absolutely. And I was really happy that the headquarters in St. Catharines asked me to come and do a presentation and training for Seizure First Aid as well as seizure recognition. So it was such a great and important step for us. Yes, you can have it without knowing it. So, with the more obvious types of seizures, like a complex partial, if they're wandering or doing things, um, or tonic clonic, obviously you would know because others around you would see you convulsing. However, there's another kind of seizure that is a generalized seizure. So it encompasses the entire part of the brain, and that's called absence. And this is often mistaken for daydreaming or not paying attention. This is quite common in kids and can continue into adulthood, but usually turns into a complex partial as well. So this is when a person stares off into space. It happens in the blink of an eye, and it's really, really quick. Sometimes it's 3 to 10 seconds. Sometimes it can last up to 20 seconds or so. And they're just staring blankly. It just looks like they're daydreaming, literally not paying attention. But, when you're daydreaming about the movie you're going to see that night or going on vacation or the next, thing you're going to buy and daydreaming about something. You remember what's happening. With this type of seizure, with an absence seizure, it is blank. It is blank periods of time. So if you're noticing that throughout the day, there are solid blanks of time that you don't remember at all, it might be a good idea to have a healthy discussion with your doctor to talk about that. And also, there's another type of seizure I want to talk to you about as well. It is a partial. It's called simple partial. It's focal onset seizure that you can remember. So it's retained memory. So this can happen in so many different kinds of ways, and you don't lose consciousness. You don't have impaired awareness at all. You remember it the whole time. And sometimes it starts where a person can have a really funny feeling in their stomach, and it lasts for, it could be seconds, it could be a couple minutes, and what's happening. It could be a really sudden burst of emotion, whether it's anger, crying, laughter. It could be that you hear, smell, or see things that aren't really there. Like, I went to a classroom one time and I'm talking about the different kinds of seizures, and this is grade 3. So I'm being really careful with my words. And this little girl puts up her hand and she's like, I think I have this. And I'm not a doctor, I can't diagnose or anything like that, but I encouraged her to bring home all of the information. Like with my presentations, there's tons of information that I give to every classroom for the kids to take home and show their parents. And so I encouraged her to bring that home. And then I look at the teacher and she's like this. So we spoke after the presentation and she's like, yeah, I think she has this. And I said, okay, so just make sure the parents have the information. If they have any questions, they can reach out and talk to me at any point, at any time, whenever they want. And she said, yeah, but it's complicated. And okay, so how can I help? And she said, well, the situation is that she hears things that aren't really there. And I said, okay. And what's the complication? And she said, well, she's on really heavy antipsychotic medication. So an 8-year-old is on antipsychotics. And she said, yes. For what? And she said, for schizophrenia. Okay. So this is a major problem because a person cannot be diagnosed with schizophrenia by a family doctor, for one, which is who apparently diagnosed her, which is 100% wrong and unethical. And you have to be 18 or approaching that age in order to be clinically diagnosed with this. So that was a major problem, and the family reached out to me, and we actually learned that she did have simple partial seizures. And it was such a great feeling to be able to help that family get to the bottom of this and get this 8-year old off of this medication because it was so strong. She was failing her class. She still had an EA, but she couldn't stay awake in class. It was such a difficult and horrible situation for that family. So yes, you can have seizures and not know that you have them. If you think or you fear that somebody that you love has this, please, and you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, and you can talk it out, and I can help you, with questions and getting you to talk to the right doctor to find out what's happening. Oh, yeah. So she has a gestational tube, Allie. Oh my gosh. Oh gosh. Okay. So Stock Explorer. Yeah, that's pretty dangerous. Hopefully she can. Um, yeah. See, I hate telling people that they should have their licenses, revoked because that's their independence. But when they're endangering other people on the road, it has to be reported. Hi, Southern Sandy. Thank you so much for joining. Phenobarbital. Yes, the How To Lady, was that the only medication that they tried? Sometimes it takes 1, 2, or 3 medications, like, as a combination to help the seizures. Um, yeah, it's so frustrating when medication just doesn't work. Unfortunately, our bodies all don't metabolize and take the medication or react to the medication that, everybody does at the same time. Um, Thank you so much, Ali. Um, Emotion, thank you so much for coming. I am so sorry I'm behind in the chat. I'm trying to get caught up. Okay. Um, oh, the How To Lady. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry to hear that. That is such an unfortunate and sad circumstance. My heart goes out to you and your family. Okay, I think I'm caught up. So I have more questions that were sent to me. Okay. Can you stop a seizure when it's happening? So it's kind of a trick question with this. So normally the answer is no. Physically, there's nothing that you can do to stop a seizure. It is heart wrenching and heartbreaking to see someone have a seizure. And it's even more heartbreaking for me to say that no, you can't stop it. When you see someone having a seizure, you can't hold them. You can't hold them down. You can't do that. You have to let the seizure run its course. However, if it is approaching the 5-minute mark, you have to call 911 because then it is becoming a dangerous situation. The longer that a seizure is running, the more damage that could be happening to the brain. After 5 minutes is when the damage could start. Now, so as I said, there's nothing that you can do to stop it. You can't hold them down, you can't hold them, you can't hug them, you can't do anything like that. But if they have a rescue medication, which is usually Ativan, it's usually sublingual, you can put it in the cheek or under the tongue. It is really super easy to do, and that often stops the seizure. Now, there's different regulations that you have to abide by when administering, such as it's usually an emergency plan written by a doctor that says, as the seizure approaches 5 minutes, you can administer the Ativan or rescue medication. Or it might say if the seizure is at 3 minutes, you have to administer. So it depends on what the doctor's directives are that you do. Now, it's so easy and it seems like such a scary thing to do. I've now been teaching schools how to administer Ativan, and it's quite easy. There's actually three different kinds. There's one that there is an injectable, and there's one that is a suppository. That is very, very rarely used at all. Most normally, it is a sublingual, and it's a little pill. And what you do is when it's time to administer, you fishhook like this, drop the pill in, and massage it into the cheek and the gums. Also, you can pinch the bottom of their lip, drop the pill, and massage. And the seizure usually stops within seconds to a minute. How long do seizures last? Now, it depends on the person, it depends on the seizure. It really is so individual. Like, not every person has the exact type of seizure. Like, when a person has a tonic-clonic, it might start and end differently than other people, and it might last differently than other people. So usually a seizure lasts for between 1 and 3 minutes. Now, that depends on the type of seizure. That's a convulsive seizure. For complex partial, sometimes it's a couple minutes, sometimes it's 10. And simple partials, it's usually just a couple of minutes. And absence seizures are usually just a few seconds. I'm going to check here. Hi, Chris. Thank you for coming back. Okay, so another question that I have. Most common seizures, so we already talked about that. So how common is epilepsy? So it depends on the country that, I live in Canada, so I can only speak to Canadian statistics. But epilepsy is more common than you think in Canada. It is just as prevalent as breast cancer. It is more prevalent than muscular dystrophy, muscular sclerosis, and cerebral palsy combined. 1 in 100 Canadians are living with epilepsy, and 1 in 10 Canadians will have one seizure in their lifetime. In Ontario, which is a fairly large province, there's approximately 90,000 people living with epilepsy. And that's kind of a big statistic to get your mind around. It's just that it's more prevalent than you think because there's so many different kinds of seizures. And with that, there's so much stigma around it. Something that's really sad that happened, that it's not crying sad, but it makes me sad for society, is I had an information booth at the Penn Center, which is located in St. Catharines, Ontario. And we were selling raffle tickets, and we were, I had a coworker with me, and we were having a good time, and people are coming up to us and buying raffle tickets and asking questions about epilepsy, and it was such a great time until someone came up to us and asked us what we were doing, and we said we were raising awareness of epilepsy, and they backed up and went like this and kept backing up and wouldn't turn their backs to us. It was such a disgusting display of ignorance that I think I've ever seen in my life. It was so sad. And we actually had 2 volunteers with us that have epilepsy. And the one person was fine with it, like took it as a joke, like, oh gosh, people are such, jerks. But the other volunteer, who was, quite young at the time, she was only in her early 20s, started crying because that wasn't the first time that that kind of ignorance happened. It was awful. But that's one of the passions that I have with Epilepsy Niagara, is to help raise awareness and educate people about epilepsy and how it happens or why it happens, and the different things that we can do. And one of the most major things that you can do for someone that is living with epilepsy, whether they're struggling with it or not, is just be kind. You don't have to minimize it. You don't have to make a big deal of it if they don't want that happening. When a person walks into the room, you don't say, "Hey, John, welcome in. Good old Epilepsy John's here." You don't do that. But you show kindness and empathy, and you do that all that you can to make them feel a part of society, or like that they aren't any different than you. They're just John. They're not John with epilepsy, which is one of the biggest things. One of the things that we like to say is that I may have epilepsy, but epilepsy doesn't have me. And it's such an empowering thought for our clients to live that little moniker there. Oh, Michelle, yeah, you used to help the EEG testing. Yeah, so that's what happens here at our EMUs, which is epilepsy monitoring units. Um, so what happens with that is patients go in that have either difficult to diagnose, or those that have more than one kind of seizure, or for those that are having trouble with having medication work. They're admitted to the epilepsy monitoring unit, or EMU, and they are off their medications because they want you to have a seizure there. You are hooked up to the EEG electrodes. So there are electrodes that go all over your head, and Michelle can talk about this as well. It's very precisely measured to be at the specific places in your brain to capture waves. And when you're there, you could be there for 24 hours, you could be there for 2 weeks. And it's to gain information on where the seizures are happening, when they're happening, what does it look like? Is it more than one? Is it instigated by flashing lights? Is it instigated only during sleep? Maybe people don't know that they have seizures in their sleep, and they're able to tell because it's a 24-hour hookup, and it's on video as well. And the doctors, and it's usually many doctors, that neurologists and epileptologists, that look at the information from these, and it's such an incredible part of the medical system that we have here. And Michelle, like, if you ever want to talk about that, please talk about it in the chat. So Michael, with vaccines, probably not. There hasn't been enough research, at least in Canada, to say that it's caused by vaccines in any way. And of course, with the recent problematic years that we've been having, there has been a lot of scariness with clients getting the vaccine and whether or not it's safe. Now, you might have trouble with vaccines if you are hypersensitive to certain chemicals. I have a client right now that's allergic to pretty much every vaccine that has been put out. So it's been a very challenging life that she's lived with, not being able to be vaccinated, even for mumps, rubella, not meningitis, chickenpox, that kind of thing, because she has such a severe allergy. 354 Barry, thank you so much for joining. Mr. Bubbles, hereditary. So it can be hereditary. It really depends on the type of syndrome that the person might have, but it seems like it's a low chance of that. But there's more and more not medication, there's more and more research that is being done to determine that, but it can be. But as I said, it usually depends on the type of disorder or syndrome that the person has. And when a person has epilepsy, sometimes an epilepsy gene panel is done to find out whether or not it is hereditary. Emotion. You had seizures in your teenage years. It was due to head injury. Dilantin for 3 years. Eventually, I no longer had to take medication. That is excellent. I love hearing happy stories about that. So, as the brain as a person ages, so does the brain, and the brain develops at different rates for different people as well. And the brain can be self-healing at times. I don't know how prevalent that actually is, but I heard that is quite possible, and that's a really happy. Yes, exactly. So what it doesn't have the disability that makes the person. You are you because of your personality, your kindness, your thoughts, your actions, the way that you are. It's not your disability that defines you. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful way for people to think. And I really do encourage people to think like that. Thank you, 345 Barry. My mouth is getting kind of mixed up here. Yes, absolutely, Michelle. It's such an important type of unit to work at, and I'm really happy that you worked at on that unit and that you have a really great sense of what happens in that unit. Yeah, Michelle. Yes. So seeing a seizure, I've seen so many seizures and so many different kinds of seizures, and it always, there's always that bit of panic that happens. But with being so used to performing and training seizure first aid, like I feel like I react really well to it. But one of the most important things to make sure that other people know is not to panic, because that's the absolute worst thing that you can do, because everybody is affected by it, including the person that's having the seizure. They may be unconscious, but they still can sense what's happening in the room. So when someone is panicking and screaming, that could make the seizure worse. Emotion, thank you so much for that really generous super chat. I appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes. Oh, okay. So your health system hasn't diagnosed the baby with seizures yet? Hmm, that's interesting. Do you know if they've been referred to an epilepsy clinic at all? Because a neurologist should really be in there. Does the family know Seizure First Aid? Because I can help with that. Even though you don't live in the Niagara area or anything like that, I can help teach Seizure First Aid, because that's a really important thing to know. Yeah, and seizures are actually quite common around the world. Chris Larson's Avengers. Hi again. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. Um, is there any more questions? I was just looking at my list of questions that was sent to me through Instagram and email, and I have everything covered. Uh, can lights trigger epilepsy? So yeah, so there's different kinds of epilepsy and the different kinds of seizures. And when Seizures are triggered by flashing lights, and that can be of varying degrees. It could be a strobe light. It could be when lights change at an intersection. It could be lights reflecting off of moving water. It could be dappled sunlight coming through leaves of trees when a person's walking. That is called photosensitive epilepsy. And one of the things that is done when a person is being diagnosed of epilepsy is they will flash a flashlight into someone's eyes to see if that triggers a seizure, because it is one of the many triggers that can cause seizures. Oh, thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. I try to do my best. March awareness is really important to me. Epilepsy is really important, and I'm extremely passionate about it. And I hope you guys can feel how passionate I am about my work. Right. So here's an interesting thing too. So depending on, like, I can only speak for Canada, and specifically Ontario, the province that I live in. And sometimes it can take years for a person to be diagnosed with epilepsy because of the fact that it depends on where you live. For instance, Northern Ontario, where there might be a visiting neurologist. So, a neurologist is a doctor that diagnoses epilepsy. An epileptologist is a doctor that only works with epilepsy. And really up north, there aren't as many neurologists available. So the average length that it can take for a person up north, Northern Ontario, to be diagnosed with epilepsy could be 10 years. In Southern Ontario, it could be sometimes 2 years. For us, it took 2 years to find out that Kira doesn't have epilepsy. And that's just because there's waiting lists. I'm not sure if it's a shortage of neurologists. It's just, it takes time to do those tests, and it's frustrating when it can take that long. So with 345 Barry, I know that you're in the UK, and I'm sure the NHS is really backed up. It can be a very frustrating time, but if there's any support that I can give or information, please don't hesitate to contact me. Okay, so Michelle, regarding seizures, so a person, epilepsy and driving. So a person cannot have a license if they have uncontrolled seizures, uncontrolled tonic-clonic seizures, or seizures of a type where your awareness is impaired in any type of way. Awareness being the ability to perceive everything that's happening around you. So they cannot retain their license. Their license in Canada is revoked. Now, if they maintain seizure freedom for 8 months to a year, sometimes 6 months, depending on the situation, they can get their license back. However, if your epilepsy is uncontrolled and you have tonic-clonic or seizures where your your awareness is impaired, then you cannot have your license. Sage Lifestyle, I'm so glad that you've learned a lot. Okay, Michelle, what would you suggest basic things that you should do or not do if someone has a seizure? So let's just do Seizure First Aid really, really quick here. The number one thing is to not panic, just like in every single type of, my voice is cracking, in any type of medical emergency, is not panic. Time the seizure is really, really, really important, because once that seizure hits that 5-minute mark, the 911 has to be called, or the equivalent, calling for an ambulance must be called at that time. Make sure there's nothing tight that is around their neck. Make sure that if they're if they have a button up, undo the first couple buttons just to loosen it. If you're outside and there's a scarf, just loosen it a bit. Make sure that the area around their neck is devoid of anything tight that could restrict any type of breathing. Move any dangerous objects out of the way, such as if they happen to have been in the kitchen and they were cutting something and the knife is on the ground, or they dropped glass, be quick, safe, move the glass away from the area. Don't move the person. When a person's having a seizure, they're extremely heavy. They are basically like dead weight and they're very hard to move. Turn them onto their side as they're having, I usually do it as they're having the seizure. And what I do is I kneel behind them just so that I could rest their back or their tailbone against my thighs, just so that they don't go onto their back. You don't want them on their back because you don't want them choking on their saliva. Having them on their side, sometimes a person may vomit or there might be a lot of foam in their mouth. They might even bite the inside of their cheek or their tongue, and there might be a little bit of drool or blood or even vomit that comes out of their mouth. And by having them on their side, it'll just come out the side of their mouth. However, if it's like really in there, I suggest taking your pinky finger and just scooping it out. Never, ever, 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 under any circumstance, put anything into their mouth. Do not. A lot of shows have actually. I remember that show House. They a patient had a seizure, and he's like, put a tongue depressor in their mouth. No, don't do that. Don't put anything in their mouth. For one thing, if you have to pry their teeth open, like their teeth are clenched. And if you have to pry their mouth open, you're going to cause damage to their teeth. And when a person's in that stage, it really is a fight or flight situation. We'll talk about that later. But a person cannot swallow their tongue. It is a physical impossibility to swallow your tongue, and it's a myth. They used to say, put a hairbrush in their mouth. I've actually heard someone say that in public. It was horrifying to hear. No, you don't have to do that at all. So if someone were to say that, yeah, just tell them, no, that doesn't happen. One of the most important things to do also is, if a seizure is happening when there's a lot of people around you, is asking people to back up and leave a lot of space. It's great for them to be curious, but it's not good to crowd and explain what's happening. It's okay. This person's having a seizure. We're timing it. Everything's going to be okay. They're going to be fine. Just give us some space. Never restrain. So as I said earlier, when you restrain a person having a seizure, you are actually doing more harm than good. A person is the strength of 10 other people in a seizure. And if you are restraining them, they will fight back. And there's a possibility that you might get hurt, and we don't want that. Also, it could cause another seizure to happen. And if that were to happen, or you can make the seizure worse and last longer. And when either of those things happen, that's called status epilepticus, and that is a life-threatening medical emergency where an ambulance has to be called right away, regardless of the time. It's really important to, my brain just went blank. It's as they're coming to, what I like to do is I just rub their arm or their side, and I just talk in a really soothing voice to say, you had a seizure, everything's fine, you're okay. And making sure that you allow them rest and offer support, and making sure that everybody around you is doing the same. Making sure that their head is protected as well during the seizure. And that means either putting a pillow under their head, or taking off, if you have a sweater or a jacket or anything like that, just ball it up and gently put it under their head. seizures can be so scary to see, and the best thing that you can do is really offering that kind of support. Um, oh, Sage Lifestyle, you are so welcome. Two pineapples. Thank you so much for coming. Sorry for the late hi. Yes, absolutely. 345 Barry. You might meet lots of other people with seizures. Um, so when a person has two or more unprovoked seizures, it is most likely that they do have epilepsy. 345 Barry. The how-to lady. I am drinking green tea. My voice likes to come and go. I have to talk so much with my clients. So I do notice that when I start talking, I start to lose it a bit. Chris Clever Clap. Oh my God. Chris's Clever Crafts. See, this is where my bloopers also come in. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so the how-to later. So usually it's not recommended. Of course, if it's recommended by the doctor that that's what your mom should do, then yes, that should be done to protect. But that sometimes can be dangerous as well. Thank you, two pineapples. Okay. I'm going to actually start to wrap it up because my voice is really starting to like really go right now. I do want to thank every single one of you for being here, and it really means a lot. Yes, Liver? Yes. Can you put it in the chat for me? The link? Next, we're going to be reading Michael's Adventures. He has a premiere coming up. My love is going to put it into the chat for me. We're still going to go on for like another 8 minutes or so. So, oh, should we do it for 7:45, Lover? Yeah, I can go longer. Michael's Adventures, if you want to let me know in the chat, if you want to go at 7:45, I can keep talking. So that's absolutely no problem if you want to do that. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. I loved hearing about your experience in the epilepsy monitoring unit. That's the Epilepsy Niagara. Um, I would love to hear more, or like talk to you in private more about it if you want. Maybe we can talk about having you up on panel later in the month, because I do want to do a few more lives about epilepsy awareness, and especially with March 26th coming up. That is the International Epilepsy Awareness Day, and it's a really great day. And unfortunately, our Niagara Falls will not be illuminated because it is an awareness day for another organization, and that's really exciting for them. And so I will be going live, but I'll probably just be going from here. And yeah, I'd love to have anybody come up and talk about it if they want to on that. So I will make sure that I get that live set up and ready soon. It would be great to go live again very soon to talk about it. There's so much things that I can talk about with epilepsy and my experience at Epilepsy Niagara. There's so many great things that happen there. I've met so many amazing people, like amazing clients and families. And we've had some really sad circumstances as well. Um, not every not every story is happy, and but every story is beautiful at the same time. Currently, there is a new family that I've been told about that has a child that has a really horrible disease. It is an epilepsy syndrome, and it's called Battens Disease. And it's extremely debilitating, and unfortunately, it is fatal. And this family is living with this child that has 7 to 10 years to live. And I know I can't imagine being told that information about a child. And when I first heard about it, I was very emotional. I can be as professional as I can be, but hearing a story like that is extremely painful. Being a parent and just being a human being, my heart just went out to this family, knowing that there's nothing that can be done. There's no medication that can save them. But the love that they have for this child is so incredibly beautiful, and this child is so amazing and very inspiring, and it's just a lovely family with a very unfortunate situation.
You said it for now.
Okay.
So you have
Okay.
5 minutes. You can drag it out.
Okay. So perfect, Michael. Thank you so much. So we will be going to Michael's Adventures at 7:30 for his premiere, which I'm really excited about because I love Michael's premieres. I love the interactivity in his chats, as well as seeing the raccoons and the critters that come to join him at his house. They're really cute videos, and I love the way that they interact with each other. Palettes, pouts, perfumes, and panty. Thank you so much for coming. Bye for now. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Now, if there's any questions that anybody has about epilepsy for the next live, please, as I've said a few times, please feel free to message me on Instagram, or if you want to email Epilepsy Niagara, you can go to epilepsyniagara.org, and there's a contact pane right there that you can reach out to me there. Oh, thank you, Chris's Clever Crafts. Thank you so much. Bye, K Elastic TV. Thank you so much for joining. And I think I covered everything about epilepsy. This is such a great month. And, for those living with epilepsy, they live with epilepsy 365 days a year. It's not just a month for them. So please, if you know anybody that is living with epilepsy, whether it's an individual or a family, please remember to just be kind and really supportive, because you never know what a person is going through. I think that's it for now. If everybody wants to head over to Michael's Adventures, please feel free to do so. And from the bottom of my heart and my soul, thank you so much for being here. And I will see you in the next live and videos. Bye for now.